A top Chinese official gets purged over a dirty secret, which doesn't narrow it down since dirty is the only type of secret in China. American investors lose big in China because betting on China is as smart as betting on the Cleveland Browns. And US officials are completely clueless about how to handle the CCP. Hey, maybe if you keep placating them, they'll start to be nice. 746th time the charm. That and more on this week's China News Headlines. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell, and this episode is sponsored by Incogni. Now, you probably know that companies are collecting your personal data, but you may not realize just how many. Dozens, maybe hundreds, most of which you've never heard of, and you have no idea what they're doing with it. Incogni helps stop them. I'll explain more at the end. The Chinese Communist Party has purged former ambassador to the U.S. Qin Gang. And of all the reasons officials ought to get purged, embezzlement, fraud, putting dissidents in labor camps, Qin Gang's reason didn't even make my top 10. And yes, I keep a clickbaity top 10 list of reasons to be purged. Number 6 will shock you. No, we live in a real-life soap opera called General Hostility, where the actual story is that he had a love child with his mistress while he lived in Washington, D.C., which may have impacted China's national security. His love child impacted national security? Did he have a spy baby? Is this the gritty prequel to Spy Kids? After leaving his post as ambassador in January, Qin Gang was appointed to be China's foreign minister, but that didn't last long. He was mysteriously disappeared back in June, and now the Chinese Communist Party officially has him under investigation for what they call lifestyle issues. That's a euphemism for sexual misconduct. But any official reason is actually a euphemism for he got on someone's bad side and now he's getting purged. Because with all that goes on in the Chinese Communist Party, having a mistress or two is practically the least corrupt thing that's going on. It's mind-boggling how many high-ranking party officials have mistresses. Former CCP Secretary of Chongqing, Bo Xilai, had 100 girlfriends while he was in power. Even former National Security Czar Zhou Yongkang had a mistress, and you'd think this guy couldn't hire a blind prostitute. And Chairman Mao was an unbridled philanderer who indulged in every sexual caprice and had over 3,000 concubines for sexual entertainment. You'd think this would impact China's national security with the number of female spies out there running honeypot operations, and everyone knows Xi Jinping can't resist a honeypot. Which is all to say, Qin Gang might officially be in trouble for having a mistress and a love child, but if you want to learn the real reason, keep watching China Uncensored for the next few months as the drama continues. China's economy is pretty much worse than the party is willing to admit, and one sign of that is venture capital funds that are invested in China are performing terribly. Most of them are losing their investors' money. One report found that among all the China-focused investment firms it looked at, only 4 have even returned investors all the money they put in. So as I've been saying for more than a decade, investing in China is a bad idea. You'd have better luck investing in Crystal Pepsi making a comeback, as an insulin substitute for diabetics. Even possibly BlackRock is starting to figure out that China's not the greatest investment. Yes, BlackRock, whose CEO Larry Fink once flew to China to advise the Chinese government, who at the height of the pandemic in 2020 said China was among the biggest opportunities, and who in 2021 advised investors to triple their investments in China despite all the risks. Yes, even that BlackRock might be starting to realize it may have made a teensy-weensy little mistake by putting so many eggs in the China basket. BlackRock has now closed their $22 million China Flexible Equity Fund, officially due to lack of new investor interest, which I believe is partly true. But also, there's been congressional scrutiny over BlackRock's alleged role in directing US dollars to blacklisted Chinese firms, which would be super illegal. And that's what really forced them to shut down the fund. So I guess BlackRock has finally learned its lesson. What's that, Shelley? Oh, apparently BlackRock still has dozens of other funds invested in China. Okay, so nobody has learned anything. And after the break, the Chinese Communist Party is being a big bully. Okay, obviously, but stick around to find out which specific way it's been a bully this week and who the victim is. Welcome back. The Chinese military is bullying Taiwan. Again, Earlier this week, the Chinese military flew more than 150 planes towards Taiwan. Taiwan's Ministry of National Defense said 40 of those planes crossed the median line, the symbolic line over the Taiwan Strait that divides Taiwan from mainland China. Until a few years ago, the Chinese military never crossed that line. Now they're doing it all the time. And if you don't think it's a big deal, think about how angry you get when you're driving and someone drifts into your lane. Lines are there for a reason. Without lines, chaos rules. But when asked about the activity, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning said there is no such thing as a median line because the island of Taiwan, although self-governing, is recognized officially as part of Chinese territory. So you're saying Taiwan's median line is just a made-up line on a map and has no basis in reality? Well, so is China's stupid 10-dash line. The Chinese Communist Party has repeatedly claimed it's committed to peace and stability in the South China Sea. Because nothing screams peace like supporting Russia in its bloody invasion of Ukraine. This week, China sent its top envoy to Russia for so-called security talks. That envoy is Wang Yi, the new foreign minister, the one who replaced Qin Gang, the guy who had a mistress in the US. Unrelated side note, Putin says Russian prostitutes are undoubtedly the best in the world, so good luck not getting honey-trapped. Also, how does Putin know Russia's are the best in the world? Is there a prostitute Olympics or something? Hopefully that torch is the only thing that's burning. Anyway, Wang Yi and his Russian counterpart agreed that any bid to end the war must take into account Moscow's interests. There should no longer be any doubt that the Chinese regime is supporting Russia in its war on Ukraine. Not just this latest visit, but also the massive increase in trade over the last year and a half. Plus Putin accepting China's invitation to visit next month to continue their no-limits friendship. So if the US is sanctioning Russia over the Ukraine war, then why does the US keep doing business with China, which is going against those sanctions? Either very smart people in charge of US policy are being very stupid, or maybe China actually has the best prostitutes in the world. Speaking of people being stupid, US National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan. To be fair, Sullivan is not actually stupid, he's very smart. He simply lacks courage, wisdom, and foresight. This week he flew to Malta to meet with Wang Yi to take a fresh stab at cooling US-China tensions. How? By discussing key issues in the US-China bilateral relationship, global and regional security issues, Russia's war against Ukraine, and cross-strait issues, among other topics. The real point of the meeting was simply the US trying to maintain open lines of communication with China. China is like a crazy girl that everyone knows is trouble, and the US is saying, I can fix her. She just needs to return my texts. And this is precisely why the White House is having such a hard time dealing with China. They're kowtowing to the CCP to maintain open lines of communication when they should be standing up for what's right and safeguarding American values like liberty. If Jake Sullivan and others in the White House had the courage to temporarily put so-called open lines of communication at risk and actually stand up to the CCP's bullying, then the CCP would eventually have to come crawling back to the US because the CCP needs a relationship with the US a lot more than the other way around. That's how you fix her. Speaking of very smart people who lack courage, wisdom, and foresight, California governor and definitely running for president at some point, Gavin Newsom. Newsom has announced that he plans to visit China in October to collaborate on climate change. Here's something stupid he said about that.
The importance, the imperative of maintaining a relationship on climate with China is about the fate and future of this planet, and it's too important. It's another example where California needs to lead.
Okay, so let me break that down. China is the world's biggest polluter. China's CO2 emissions exceed all developed nations combined. They have no intention of stopping. They're constantly building new coal power plants. It's not because the CCP hates the environment. It's because they need coal power to maintain low energy costs so they can keep the cost of manufacturing low so their economy doesn't tank so they can keep a grip on power more powerful than the grip Gavin Newsom's hair gel has on his scalp. It's simple, rational, and Gavin Newsom does not understand it. No, Newsom thinks that if he goes to China and asks really, really nicely, China will suddenly start reducing carbon emissions. That is stupid. Newsom believes that despite many other US leaders trying the same thing and failing every time, that perhaps if he goes to China, it'll be different this time. Wait, that's not stupid. That's a definition of insanity. Or narcissism. A narcissist that uses way too much hairspray. Wow, maybe Newsom really is presidential material. The actual solution is to realize that the Chinese Communist Party has no intention of reducing emissions for the sake of climate change. The way to stop China from polluting the world is for the world to stop buying cheap crap made in heavily polluting Chinese factories. Like that time during COVID where Newsom made a deal to buy $1 billion worth of face masks and PPE from China. If Newsom really wants to reduce global carbon emissions, then instead of buying cheap crap from China, he should push California to build up its own manufacturing, to produce slightly more expensive but much better quality crap. Because then it can all be done according to California's carbon emissions standards. And as a bonus, it'll create blue-collar jobs, which will help get him reelected. That would be called wisdom, which Gavin Newsom does not have. But at least he's got great hair. And this episode is sponsored by Incogni. Whenever you do anything online or use apps on your phone, there's a huge number of companies that collect your personal data. When I signed up for Incogni, I discovered there were dozens of data brokers that potentially had my private information without my permission. And these companies can get hacked, spreading my private information even more widely. For example, back in June, Chinese state-linked hackers breached hundreds of public and private networks, stealing Americans' email addresses and personal information. So what can you do? Get as many companies as possible to delete your data off the internet. That's what Incogni does for you. Since I signed up for Incogni, they've sent 200 requests to have my data removed. Most of them have already been completed and a lot more are in progress. And I didn't have to do anything after signing up. Incogni just handles it. So I recommend you get Incogni for yourself. Click the link below or go to incogni.com/uncensored. The first 100 people to use the code UNCENSORED will get 60% off. Get your personal data off the market with Incogni. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching China Uncensored.